Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Epic Gardening Podcast, International Edition. We have Matthew Reese Warren on the podcast. He's a gardener. He's been a professional gardener. He's the author of the book, The Ecological Gardener, which you can pick up in the podcast description. So, Matt, we talked yesterday, I would say at a philosophical level almost, about the interplay between, weeding and keeping your garden nice and organized. And, now there's this amendment that you hear all the time. I think a lot of us listening probably have heard of it, and that would be biochar. And I have to confess, I really haven't done much with biochar in my garden, which I think I need to remedy. So I'm as curious as everyone listening as to, how you use this in your practice.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's been something quite new to me too. I think I, like you and maybe lots of your listeners, had heard about it a lot and maybe heard it on a more sort of, amendment to composts or something like that. But as I started to dig into it a few years ago, researching the book, I began to realize how adaptable and easy it is in normal gardening method. And the key to it is every year, like say if you take a garden over the course of a year, we're going to accumulate some wood. Now, generally that's not going to be sort of like loggable wood, because that's maybe a proper big tree fell. It's going to be brush. It's going to be brush. It's going to be branches and stuff like that. And maybe that's too big for the compost. You might sort of, break it down if you wanted to, but generally you're going to accumulate this sort of rather large pile of twiggy sort of branchy wood. And what you generally do is have a fire. Mm-hmm. And, over the years, that is what I have done. But as I began to realize this, read about biochar, I began to realize that what you can do with that is you can take all of that and you can burn it to biochar, and you can use that biochar and put it straight back in the soil. So in a sense, when you take your wood and you burn it all the way through, you are releasing carbon dioxide and you are just taking the thing down to ash. You may then think, great, it's potash or whatever, and I can put it on my roses or put it back in the compost pile. But what biochar is doing is suspending that process. So imagine a big pile of a big pile of branches. You start burning. What you want to do is stop that burn before it reaches the ash stage. So a wood would start burning, go into sort of a charcoal stage, go down into embers, and then go to ash. And in its simplest form, biochar is trying to suspend that wood at the charcoal stage, and then you put that back into the soil. So you are suspending the carbon. So instead of whenever you would burn through that charcoal and burn it into ash, you would be burning off that carbon into carbon dioxide. But biochar asks you stop that process, lock that carbon in, and then put it straight back into the soil. Not quite as simplistically as that. I'll describe the more processes. But in your mind, that's what you want to be thinking. And when you start to think about it that simplistically, you go, oh my God, of course, this is using the resource I have in the most sustainable way I can. And even quite simplistic. It almost made me think, this is just the same as composting. It's almost like I was burning all of my, green compost before. This is crazy. It is a little bit harder than that. You have to have certain things set up. But I love the most simplistic method, which is just the shallow pit method. So you dig a shallow pit, only about 50 centimeters deep. And you take your brush and you start to sort of process it a little bit. So bring it down a little bit, get it down into nice sort of twigs, just like you would if you were getting a good fire going out in the bush, right? Get it so it's going to do a good fire. And then you've got to think, start stacking this fire down in the bottom of the pit and start stacking it like a cooking fire. If you know what that means, it means to sort of, lay one way and then lay the other way, like a patchwork. And so you lay, your sticks in one direction and you start the fire on that. and then you lay them the other direction, and you completely cover that top layer over the bottom layer. So you're almost getting rid of the oxygen as you go, and you layer this up. It's all happening quite quickly. The fire is burning through, and then when you get to the top, and when you get to all of your stuff done, you pour quite a lot, I must say, water, and collect rainwater for it, upon that fire. And that is putting it out before it goes to ember stage, before it goes to ash. That is a very primitive way of making charcoal. What you have there is charcoal. If you wanted to burn it as charcoal, you can. You have to dry it out. But we want to make biochar. Biochar is quite simply just taking charcoal, inoculating it with microorganisms. So, you just put it in a compost pile, basically, and then putting it in the soil. It's as simple as that. It goes back to the terra preta, which is where you famously hear about with biochar, is the soils of South America. The people and tribes and civilizations down there have used this method for many years to improve the rather odd, in your mind, soils of South America. You'd think Amazon jungles, amazing soils, but weirdly they have quite depleted soils. And so that's where this biochar sort of ancient tradition came from. But I think it's probably just a really ancient human tradition to understand that you burn your fires, and maybe if you keep it, they would have put it on crops and things like that from very early days, I think. So, yeah, a fantastic way of sort of, one, stopping putting carbon dioxide into the air unnecessarily, and then two, a way of locking this carbon in. And so therefore your soils over a longer period of time are going to improve. And that is, many of us are really truly going to be, understanding now that our soils are so precious. Making compost and putting that is just top layering. It's fantastic, we must do it. But the soil grows very, very slowly. Very slowly, like 3 centimeters every sort of 1,000 years or so. It's ridiculous. So protecting them is so important. So putting this in, locking this carbon in that is almost going to be in that soil forever, is a fantastic way of bringing about a really good microorganism rich and habitat rich soil.
Yeah, it's something that I really need to get into. I think it's interesting in my climate, my amount of wood product that I create per year, I think, especially in this first year on the new property, it's very low. So if I was to make it, I would have to source the wood from somewhere. But I think especially as my orchard grows, as some of these other things grow, or if I was to, take a non-productive tree down or something, it's something I really, really want to experiment with, because I just haven't, and I'm interested in it, and everything you're saying makes complete sense as far as the responsible use of resources, or the optimal use of resources. So fantastic primer on biochar. Thank you for that, Matt. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about building a garden out of a sack, something very simple that you can all do at home. So stay tuned. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing. If you love a good deal, a good giveaway, or a good sale, then head on over to the Epic Gardening newsletter at epicgardening.com/newsletter. That's the only place I'm really putting out upcoming product releases, upcoming courses, giveaways of products, as well as sales on things, and just a lot of gardening tips that I'm not putting out elsewhere. It's kind of like my personal diary to everyone who subscribes. So if you're interested in that, again, it's www.epicgardening.com/newsletter. You can also click the link in the podcast description, and I'll see you on over there. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.